Hi, I'm Dave Hilowitz. So one of the things that everybody's always asking me is how do you make an arpeggiator in Kontakt? And I think that a lot of people don't realize that I actually didn't write the arpeggiator that I'm using in a lot of my instruments. It's one that comes with Kontakt. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, I thought it would be fun to kind of like go into what is involved in actually writing your own arpeggiator. Because writing your own arpeggiator, if you want it to be good at least, it's an involved thing. It would take maybe a week or two of work. I've never actually taken the plunge. I've always just used the stock one that comes with Kontakt. So we're gonna go a little bit down that pathway, and then we're gonna bail, and then I'm gonna show you the Kontakt one. Yeah, let's get started. So what we're working with today are samples of this. It is a toy piano keyboard. It's called the Simba Mini Piano. It's about $5 on Amazon. It's pretty terrible sounding. The only good thing I can say about the instrument itself is that it's actually polyphonic, and almost no kids' keyboards are polyphonic. Okay, so we're ready to go. We have Kontakt up, we've got live running, and here are my samples. And we're going to make a new instrument, and we're gonna go into the mapping editor, and I'm going to drag all my samples in. And we're gonna right click on these, and we're gonna do auto map. And as you can see, these samples have all been numbered according to the MIDI note number. It's always helpful to do that. So I'm gonna hit apply, and there you can see it's a pretty narrow range, but we have one sample per key, which is pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to grab these, and I'm gonna right click on this, and I'm gonna do batch tools, move root key to center. This is what sets the root key. So let's turn that reverb off. And here's what they sound like. So kind of cool. I could definitely see it like mixing its way into like, I don't know, a synthwave track or something like that. Yeah, it's a kid's keyboard, but that's what it sounds like. Okay, so we've got our basic patch already done, and it sounds the way it sounds. We're gonna open up the script editor and we can get started. So as with all scripts, we're gonna start with an on-init block. I'm going to title the script main, and we're going to do make perf view, and hit apply. And now I'm just going to back out, and we're going to go, okay, the perf view worked. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable that is going to hold the number of steps. We're going to do 16 steps. We're going to have it just, I think, hard-coded at 16 because, yeah, this is a basic little script right now. So declare num steps, and we're going to set it to 16 right from the get-go. So the second thing that we need, and kind of like the hallmark of any arpeggiator, is there's going to be this nice table, this nice grid called the UI table that allows you to set the velocity of all of the different steps. So we're going to declare a UI table. Before I do that, I'm actually going to look at the spec for that, and we can just grab this. We can see here that along with declaring a UI table, we're actually declaring an array. An array is basically just a variable that has a lot of different parts. So a normal variable holds like a number, like you might hold the number 3. An array could hold a bunch of different numbers, and they're sequential. So in this case, we're going to be storing velocities, and we need 16 steps because we have 16 steps in our arpeggiator. So we're going to declare an array that has 16 columns. So we're going to grab this, we're going to paste that here. So the first parameter is the name of the array, and we're just going to call it steps. Yeah. And the second parameter is columns, and it's the number of columns. Now we already know the number of steps, it's 16, so we're just going to pop 16 in there. The third parameter is width, and this is not width in any kind of programming sense. This is actually the visual width in the performance view. We're going to just do 4 by 4 in grid units. 4, 4. And as you can see, the final parameter is range. We're going to be storing velocities. So we know that velocity in MIDI land is between 0 and 127. So our range is going to be 127. Now, if we hit apply, we should already see our table. There it is. So what we've done here is we've declared this table and added it to the performance view. We've also declared an array which can be referenced. So for example, if I were to say steps 3, by the way, arrays are always, the numbering for the columns starts at 0. So steps 3 is actually the 4th column. It's a little confusing. So if I were to say steps 3 equals, I don't know, 127, then hit apply, you can see that is all the way up. If I were to say steps 2 equals half of, let's say we're going to make it 64, which is half. So you can see we're able to reference this array, and we can assign values to it, and we can pull values from it, which is what we're going to be doing later on. So I'm going to get rid of this. I was just kind of showing you how the array works. And otherwise, this array, other than it starts with a percentage sign instead of a dollar sign, it works a lot like variables. The only thing is you always have to have a little parameter after the name, steps, and that indicates what column you're trying to reference. So one thing you'll notice is if I hit apply, my values all go away. And that's super annoying. So we're going to fix that. We're going to do make persistent %steps. Hit apply. And now let's say I make a nice pattern. I hit apply, and you can see it's preserved what I did. It actually saw that it sort of like slightly changed the values, but whatever. So okay, I think we're looking pretty good here. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to declare another variable that's just a counter variable. It's basically just going to be a number that counts the step and tells us what step we're at right now. So another control that I want is a rate control, because it would be nice to be able to specify the rate that my arpeggiator goes at. So we're going to do a little menu. We're going to do declare UI menu. And I'm actually going to look up. So this is how UI menu gets initialized. And I'm actually just going to take this sample code, and we're going to paste it here. And instead of menu, I'm going to call it rate. As you can see, we've made a little menu called first entry, second entry, third entry, but our first entry is actually going to be quarter note. And our second one's going to be eighth note. The third one's going to be 16th note. And this second parameter in add menu item, you can see here there's a parameter. That's a numeric value that corresponds to each of these. So if I choose eighth note, it's going to return 1. Well, I don't want it to return 1. I want it to actually return the length eighth note, and Kontakt actually has constants built in for all of the standard note lengths. So actually I'm gonna see if I can find a list. Okay, there we go. These are our options. So I'm actually just gonna paste these in, and we're gonna make a menu item for each of these. And there was one that I missed, duration quarter, which is actually going to be the first one. So I'm just going to do duration quarter, duration eighth, duration 16th, and let's go nuts. Let's make those triplet ones too. Okay, our menu is done, except that I wrote note. Let's be a little more consistent. So again, this is something that we want to be persistent across reloads. So I'm going to do make persistent. So I'm going to choose 1/4 triplet. I'm going to hit apply, and it did not reset to a quarter. So we're working. Okay, finally, one more control is I want to have a little knob that controls the duration of the notes. We have the rate that we're going at, but we don't have the duration. So finally, I'm going to do declare UI knob duration. And this is the function signature for declaring UI knobs. And Actually, we only need the last part of that. We're going to grab min. The minimum duration would be 1, let's say. Not really, but maximum would be 100. And then finally, display ratio. Okay, we're just going to keep that at 1. And we're going to hit 1, and we're going to hit apply. Okay, there's our little duration. And we're going to make that persistent. And let's have a default value of 50, which I think is going to be a percentage, like 50% of a quarter note. I think that's how we're going to do this. Okay, so I think we've got the entire performance view done. Time now to actually implement this thing. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a new block called onNote. Zoom. Try to figure out why that's not working. Okay, onNote and on. And this is a little chunk of code that's going to be called every time we hit a note. The first thing we want to do actually is we want to ignore the note that came in, because by default what will happen is we'll hit a note on our keyboard or on our MIDI controller or whatever, and it'll come into Kontakt, and Kontakt will want to play the note. That's normal. We actually want to control the playback of the note, so we're going to do ignore event, and once again I'm going to look in the manual for ignore event and how you do that. Here we go, ignore event ID number. Okay, we're just going to copy that over. Ignore event, and the event ID is what we want. So event ID. So now if I hit apply and I hit a note, we don't get any sound because we've basically just canceled out the note. Okay, so now that we've stopped Kontakt from playing any notes, we're going to play some notes ourselves. And we're going to do that sequentially because we're basically making a little sequencer. So in order to play notes sequentially, we need a loop, something that's going to iterate over all of the steps in our UI table. So we're going to make a while loop. And while, specifically, we're going to loop for as long as the note is held, the note being the thing that actually triggered the sequencer in the first place. So we can actually use a special token called note held. And basically, as long as we're holding down a note, this while loop is going to iterate over and over and over again. Another thing we need to do is we need to use that counter variable. You remember up here, we declared this counter. Now we're going to see why. We're going to set it to 0, which is the first step. It's basically just going to allow us to step through all of the values in our array, in our UI table. So we're going to increment the counter every single, do counter equals counter plus 1. And there is actually a quicker way of doing this, but this is a more legible way. And we can actually close this. Okay, and if counter is 16, we could do end if counter is 16, then counter equals 0. So basically, when we reach that 16th position, we want to go back to 0. Okay, I just hit apply, and it's telling me that I actually need to have a colon here because I'm actually trying to assign a value to this counter. So we've got this counter, and it's counting up from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it hits 16, and it goes back to 0, and it's basically doing that over and over again. We're now ready to actually play the notes, the thing that we are actually doing all of this scripting for. So we're going to call play note at the top of this. And okay, and this is the function signature for play note. Just going to grab the whole thing. And the note number, we're actually going to use a special token, and let's see if it actually, oh, there it is, event note. We're going to grab event note, and there's another one that's event velocity. Except that we don't actually want the velocity. We want this UI table's velocity, because that's actually what the UI table is supposed to be holding, velocities. So what did we call our variable up there? Steps. Okay, so we are going to do %steps. And you remember, this is an array, so we have to actually put the step that we're talking about. And the step that we're talking about is counter. So that's what the counter is actually for. It's for knowing which of these steps we're referencing at any given time. Sample offset is basically where in the sample we're starting. We're always going to be starting at the 0. And duration is interesting because we're actually going to use that duration knob that we have up here. So we're going to do rate times duration. And so we're going to start with rate. We're going to do times, and this duration is going to be a percentage. So we're going to do duration divided by 100. There we go. Okay, so there's one other thing. If we hold down this, what's going to happen is it's going to play super loud. And the reason it's going to play super loud is it's going to iterate across all of these steps very, very, very fast. We don't have anything that's limiting the rate to the current tempo. So what we want to do is we want to put in another call, which is wait. And basically, we need to wait this amount of time. We need to wait, either a quarter note or an eighth note in between playing the notes. So we basically want to do play step 0, wait, play step 1, wait, play, you get the idea. Basically continues like that. So we're going to put rate in here. Okay, so now we've got a little wait in there. So it's going to play the note at a specific length, and then it's going to wait, and then it's going to play a note, and then it's going to wait. Okay, so let's give this thing a spin. Pretty cool. Okay, so we said that after we put together this kind of basic sequencer thing, we would look at the full-fledged arpeggiator. If you did want to write your own arpeggiator, basically the way you would do it is you would take this while loop and you would basically increase its complexity a lot. You would have to keep track of all the notes that were being held at a given time, and you'd have to have a library of different patterns like zigzag, up and down, and just up, just down, and you need to do basically a bit of math and a little bit of like looking up into lookup tables to figure out what notes need to be played when. The same principle essentially, but instead of just playing the same note over and over again, you'd be playing the next note that was held. So fairly complicated, probably take a couple weeks to put it together. I have never taken the plunge. I've never coded my own arpeggiator just because I've never had to. Kontakt actually comes with one. If you haven't explored these factory scripts, I highly recommend it. There are a lot of really useful ones, and they're all, you can look at the source for any of them and modify the source. So for example, in sequencing, there is an arpeggiator. And there we have it, this nice arpeggiator. And if we hold down a key, it works just like you'd think it would. This is the on-off switch. I have my own version of this arpeggiator that basically got rid of some of the options and made some of the controls a little bit bigger and easier to use. I like the rhythm to be kind of front and center because I like to vary my rhythm. But otherwise, basically when I use arpeggiator, I just choose the Kontakt one. By the way, when you click back to your performance view, you'll notice that there's nothing there. The arpeggiator isn't a performance view by default. So if you want it to actually appear as a performance view, you just do make perf view, just as you would with your own script. And you can go back here. And now that is your arpeggiator tab. You'll also notice that I've added Ultra TKT. This is a script by this guy, Big Bob. I've actually got a whole video about this script, link below. It's super useful, and basically it's a way of faking round robin. So I've added that here. The reason I'm mentioning that is if you have a script like our step sequencer script that we made in this video, or the arpeggiator, there's sort of like a caveat. There's a thing that you have to know, which is that any script like Ultra TKT or any script that you might write that does manipulation on the groups has to come after it in the group ordering. So Kontakt runs all of its scripts in order. So it runs the left tab, then the second tab, then the third tab, then the fourth tab. It runs them in order. And if you have a script that is keeping track of round robins or doing some kind of funny manipulation of groups, you want that to be the last script in your chain of scripts, as it were. That can make things pretty hairy, especially if you've got UI on that tab that you want to be the first tab, then things can quickly become a mess. The other option, of course, is to try to build this arpeggiator into your own script, which is totally doable. Basically just move it down in the UI. But yeah, these are the kinds of like weird juggling problems that you have when you're putting together a complicated UI. I usually find a way of having the third or fourth tab be the round robin script. But yeah, it's a headache. But still, you get an arpeggiator for free and you don't have to do all of that coding work. If you look here, you can see that the arpeggiator is massively complicated. It has all these lookup tables. But yeah, just scrolling through this, you get a sense of how complicated writing an actual arpeggiator would be, and especially one that's pretty full-featured like this one. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We've gone through both the rudiments of how to make a kind of basic sort of sequencer thingy, and I've also shown you the stock factory Kontakt arpeggiator script, which is pretty great. Hope this video was helpful. I'm going to clean up this UI and make a nice skin, and then I'm going to upload it, and there should be a link in the description of this video by the time the video is released. Yeah, if you've been enjoying these videos, remember to hit like and subscribe. Take care. See you next time.